People are always looking for new experiences in this day and age. The rapid pace and lack of nuance within our consumption of media can propel people to lean one-sided on most philosophical, political, or cultural droll that perpetuate our daily lives. Pushing the envelope is not presenting new ideas or waxing prose for impressionable young minds, but rather how quick you can get to a punchline with dissonant imagery and sound bites to elicit an immediate visceral reaction. Mimetic is probably the word I'm looking for to describe the way mainstream media and its audiences are consuming the arts/entertainment of today. And then there's a disconnect here for the more critically minded, school-taught, quote-unquote hags of any and all industries. Critics of classic and modern media were bred during a phase when our weekly newsletter or the peak of Game Informer subscriptions for every Call of Duty pre-order was how the limited yet vast audience of video games consumed things. I was sold on Game Informer's underselling of Persona 3 FES when they put a half-page review on an over 80-hour JRPG with life sim elements I've been missing since Steambot Chronicles. It is absurd how both games have lived rent-free in my head all these years later, and now to see just how quickly people can both love and ignore a game like Unicorn Overlord. How insane is it that all three of these games I just mentioned have been or currently are under the Atlus banner of console games? It never crossed my mind just how much of Atlus's output during the PS2 era I had already experienced before the associations in my mind were made with a spin-off to the mainline games with the most Japanese stroke-inducing pronunciation of its name. JRPGs are all about making your way through humble beginnings to reach the conclusion of fighting God with your bare fists. But Unicorn Overlord is more tactics and strategy than anything else recently put out by said publisher and developer Vanillaware. What confuses me is how much criticism gets laid onto the simplicity of its story, because a campaign about a dude versus a big bad dude has to be any more complicated than it already is. What you will receive from this game is a lifetime's worth of gear optimization, trial and error on brand new strategies, tireless hours of perfecting team compositions, and that signature flair you can expect from Vanillaware. There would be a Jason Schreier joke in here, but all that would do is deviate from video game time. Okay, so last time I was about 30 hours into the game, knee-deep in Elheim content. I come to you today after a 9-hour-long streamed finale to say this game did not earn its Persona moment at the very end there. For the countless hours I spent grinding out experience and honor, as well as recruiting as many new units throughout the story as I could, everyone's characterizations feel so spread out across a thin veil of depth and development in the form of rapport events. Yet, once I've already promoted everyone to their advanced class and maxed out the sizes of all of my units, the game does not present these characters in an interesting enough way for me to constantly pursue the next stage of each rapport relationship across this giant cast of characters you are able to recruit. The characters' stat growths and inherent abilities are different enough from each other to show discernible differences during combat, but stacking 5 people in a somewhat lore-accurate unit does not produce any more interesting results across the number of relationships that can be developed during your time playing. By the end, my army felt more bloated than necessarily large for the sake of the mission at hand to defeat Garius and free the lands of Fevrith from Zenoiran rule. I went into my last 9 hours fully expecting there to be only 3 full battles and 1 redoable sigil battle left to complete the game, only to be introduced to the many different routes you can take to reach Grand Corinne with an accompanying level 40 battle for each of them. That's on me for not having the foresight of checking each route to start the Unicorn Overlord quest, and it tacked on a considerable amount of hours still tinkering away at my teams and character builds even during the twilight of this journey I've been on since that 8-hour demo before release sold me on its gameplay loop. I never got tired of exploring the overworld map to discover new liberation quests, even going so far as to liberating and rebuilding every town across the entire world map during my only playthrough. I would find myself in this issue though of constantly being reminded of the characters I don't have in my units, never being able to fully figure out what makes them good in certain unit compositions, and then leaving them off the wayside for any sort of rapport building because I already had everything unlocked with all of the honor I accrued over the last 9 hours of my playthrough. For any other incentives to build up rapport across the cast, I could easily see myself putting time into figuring out just how busted some of the angels or bestrels were in certain comps, but it was only there for the smallest increase of honor spread throughout the world map. A lot of things definitely feel like last minute additions on a game running dangerously out of budget during the last leg of the journey. Completing Armaments of the Anemoy grants you a singular Novice Military Treatise item. For context, the Novice Military Treatise is a consumable item you can give to your characters in and out of combat that grants 50 EXP, with an additional 3x EXP for characters level 10 or below. Any of the enemies you have to clear to receive any of the Anemoy equipment are level 35, with the assumption that you've found over 80% of the world map already. Defeating the enemies gives you decent to great equipment, yet completing the entire questline, which would require you to have discovered over 90% of the map, gives you a singular consumable that mostly benefits characters that are lower than level 11. Even if you did have a character you were actively using in your units at this point in the game, at the highest point of effectiveness at level 10 for this item, a singular Novice Military Treatise will not level them up if you haven't gained EXP with them prior to using the item. Once you've used your honor to promote units and expand them, there isn't even a way to use residual honor to do things that maybe could have made sense to level up someone this new and green to your army with a singular Novice Treatise. I like the different routes you can take to enter the last main quest of the game, which are accessible by doing a couple extra battles that encircle Grand Corrine. Picking different routes will alter the way you will send out units to the perimeter of the city, and different events can occur depending on the different pivotal choices you made throughout your campaign. For me, Herman and other Drakenhold soldiers appeared on the northeast side of the map that helped with taking a command post on that section of the map. A dark miasma permeates and traps the residents of the city of Grand Corrine, and the only way to clear that area to assault Garius is by defeating 4 other stronger enemies spread across the perimeter. They all have different effects on the immediate area around them when you approach them, but most of their fights were formidable for a lot of my units I was using here. And then there's Garius. Garius can only be described as a prick of a not final boss. Before even reaching him, there are battering rams on opposite sides of the city walls that we can use to break through the gates. This isn't until Garius uses a useless spell, mostly there to have you use a valor point before reaching him, with a periodic recasting of it, but only as a smaller AoE version of the same spell. But yet how naive I was to think this would be the worst of my troubles when dealing with Garius. After infiltrating the city walls and clearing any outposts guarded by enemies, you meet Garius at the center of this area. With his big-ass horse and protruding belly armor and all of the pomp and circumstance you can exude from such a monstrous figure, fighting him is so fucking annoying in all aspects you can think of for a tactics game like this. The first 6 attacks you do on him will be completely blocked by his dark armor ability. He then spends the next 3 attacks trying to debuff and cause ailments across your whole unit. And then he goes into full team attacks to dish out damage across the board to each of your characters, where my unit was built tanky enough, thankfully, with the right gear that I could block a lot of the ailments thrown out. Then there's this. As he stands, garrisoned at his post, he has the typical passive healing over time, when you deal damage to him in battle. That's perfectly fine and consistent with how the rest of the game has worked up to this point. But then you get this sudden 152 health regen after exiting battle with him. Then you decide to fight him again to deal half of his life bar, only for him to have more than half of his life bar back the next battle. Every time you fight him, he is healing 152 HP after every battle you initiate with him. For every assist you use in battle, their stamina goes down by 1 point until it's just your single unit trying to stand toe-to-toe with this hulking corpse. To recap, he blocks your first 6 attacks, tries to inflict random ailments to your entire unit, goes to do full unit attacks where the chances of dodging or blocking damage are highly improbable, has a passive healing over time from his garrisoned post, and heals 152 HP no matter how much damage he received after every battle you initiate with him. It was slow, tedious, cheap, and overall not fun for padding to put a bow on this entire experience. but technically he's not the final boss. I can't tell you when I lost track of time trying to close the book on this game, but after dealing with the true final boss, major disappointment after the annoying struggle prior, I was ready to clock out. I look back retrospectively on my time with the game by reading all of the epilogues for the over 60 characters I hired to join the Liberation Army, and realize that just adding them to my army gives them what I would consider a good ending for each of them. Rapport didn't really matter for their character development. It didn't matter whether or not you used a character as long as you recruited them, and I was tired by the end. Being up past 3 in the morning added to that last point, but after 90 hours of this tactics RPG epic, I feel satiated for any other strategy releases in the future. I enjoyed my time in Unicorn Overlord, but a lot of my attachment to characters will be left behind as I move along to other games. The game also tried to give me a side quest after rolling credits on me. Look man, if you wanted me to find the true ending to this with an optional challenging boss, try not to close out the game with credits before showing me that. That's a pretty weak way to end this. Great game. The last 10 to 12 hours are very drawn out. Okay, goodbye.